For our last topics in the issue of American imperialism, we're going to look at China. Here is where Secretary of State John Hay comes into the story. He sees China as a place where America and other European nations could cooperate rather than compete in order to get the best possible benefits. Now, these Western nations, just say 50 years earlier, Britain had been in charge. Perhaps you remember seeing this cartoon in your sophomore English class, where we see that Great Britain, Russia, Germany, France, and Japan are all involved in chopping up or cutting the slices of China. But now, at the end of the 1900s, it is America who is in charge. So here we see sort of the Uncle Sam character taking charge. Now, what John Hay does is he is sort of communicating with these other European countries, not through official diplomatic relations, but what we call notes. And what he's sort of saying to all these other countries is that there should be a free, open market for all of these countries that are involved in China. And he believes that this would benefit American businesses, but also prevent disputes between all of these countries who have an interest in China. So this is called the open door policy. He wants to have an open door to trade. And the major things he wants are that all countries have access, and in this case it would be all Western countries have access, but he wants all of these countries to have equal trading rights, rather than sort of only a few countries being granted most favored nation status. He really wants it to be more equal. There's a hitch in this, though. In 1900, the Boxer Rebellion begins. Maybe you'll remember from sophomore history that this is a rebellion by the Chinese citizens, particularly a group of Chinese called the Society of Righteous and Harmonious Fists, and they believed that the spirits of their ancestors would help them rid their country of foreigners. So they are very anti-foreigner. We have a case where the Chinese start killing the Europeans, and these European armies rush in to protect their citizens, but even more so to protect their economic investments. When this Boxer Rebellion happens, all these armies are sent in. The Chinese are very easily squashed. But from John Hay's perspective, this is even more of a reason why these Western countries should cooperate together rather than compete in order to get the most possible value out of China. Now this brings us to a President Roosevelt. Now President McKinley, who we have been talking about, he was assassinated in 1901. He had only served less than a year of his second term in office, and so his vice president now becomes the president. So a little bit about Roosevelt's background. He grows up in a very shishi, well-to-do New York family. And as he grows up, he sort of starts leaning towards a more sort of rough and tumble persona. He loves the idea of empire and expanding American control, but he also loves the idea of sort of this manly explorer, pioneer persona. This is one of my favorite pictures of him. He looks like he is out in the country, but it's really in a photo studio in New York. And he is very famous while as president. He was supposedly on a hunting trip and refused to shoot a mama bear and her cub. And at the time, bear stuffed animals then got the nickname teddy bears after Teddy Roosevelt. Now he becomes president, and he is absolutely going to continue these expansionist ideas that President McKinley had begun. And the phrase that really becomes associated with Roosevelt is what he got from a Western African proverb: speak softly and carry a big stick. So, watch what you're doing, but don't be afraid to use force in order to obtain what you want. So what he wants is a two-ocean navy, going back to this idea from Mahan about the importance of having a strong modern navy. But he wants a two-ocean navy because American territories are in the Atlantic and in the Pacific. But there's a problem geographically. You have to go all the way around the tip of South America in order to reach both oceans. So this is why we need a canal. And this idea of a canal is not brand new. Roosevelt is not the one who came up with it. There were several potential locations for a canal: through Mexico, through Guatemala, and through Panama. A French company had started this process as early as the 1860s, but they ran out of money and lots of people had died due to yellow fever and malaria, so they kind of gave up. Now in 1903, the Panamanians, they were a group that was under Colombian control. And they decide they want independence. And what do you know? America decides we are going to help these people get their independence because we love freedom. It's one of these American ideas. And that is truly the only reason why we would support people gaining independence from other countries. We are supporting the Panamanians because they would support our idea of a canal, whereas the Colombians wouldn't. When Panama becomes an independent country, a man by the name of Pierre Bounavarea, who had been part of the French company trying to build the canal, he is made into essentially a minister of this new Panamanian government. And so John Hay and Philippe Bounavarea create a treaty. So this is between the new country of Panama and America. It is part of the land. They're going to have a 10-mile wide strip across this isthmus in which to build the canal, and America will get to hold on to 6 miles of that. There's going to be a one-time payment of $10 million to the Panamanian government, and that's going to be the equivalent today of about $200 million. And there will also be an annual payment, kind of like a rent. That would be $250,000 at the time. But then the United States also guarantees the independence of Panama. Now, how would we guarantee someone's independence? Well, we would do that with our military. And so we are going to use our Navy to not only gain economic power, but we will use it to protect our interests. Construction begins in 1904, and this was a huge, huge undertaking. I mean, the territory isn't particularly huge, but the land itself is very volcanic, and so anytime land would be excavated, it would kind of start to cave in on itself. A lot of the labor is coming from the West Indies, and the reason this is working better now than it had under the French attempt is there is better medicine and able to prevent or treat malaria and yellow fever. When they start the most difficult part of construction, they are excavating the equivalent of the Channel Tunnel, which is that tunnel that links Great Britain to France. They're excavating that amount of earth every 3 months. It takes 10 years to complete and leads to what is still an incredibly important pass-through or sort of trade conduit for the world. In building this, it cost us about $375 million total. It includes the money we paid to Panama, the money we paid to the original French company, and it did come in $23 million under budget. Now, the current equivalent of what that all cost, $9 trillion. This canal allows us to sort of really enact the Monroe Doctrine. But it also allows Roosevelt to sort of add his own perspective, what we call the Roosevelt corollary. Not only do we not want European powers to stick their noses into Western Hemisphere issues, but that America will sort of be the policeman of the Western Hemisphere, and we will get involved in any place where we see that our interests are being violated. Thing is, we can sort of interpret very easily what our interests are. In 1904, same year construction begins, the Russo-Japanese War begins. Now, both Russia and Japan were not particularly ready to go to war, but Japan is interested in showing off their new modern navy. That happened after the Meiji era, when Commodore Matthew Perry went to Tokyo in 1854. The Japanese were forced to open up to trade and decide to modernize in order to have a more advantageous position. Russia has been this huge empire, and they're not particularly modern, but they really do want warm water ports. Russia, though very, very large, is very, very cold, and they have very few warm water ports that can be used all year long. This war lasts just under a year. Technically, Japan wins, but there are sort of similar losses from both countries. And the treaty is going to be the Treaty of Portsmouth. And Russia and Japan ask President Roosevelt to help negotiate this treaty. So this is signifying Roosevelt's position in the world as sort of an empire builder and a leader in this field. The Treaty of Portsmouth really benefits Japan. The territory of Korea goes to Japan. Russia gives over the port of Port Arthur. Russia loses prestige, Japan gains it, and Teddy Roosevelt wins the Nobel Peace Prize, which is a little ridiculous. Another thing that happened in the Roosevelt administration is the 1905 Imperial Cruise. Now, this is a little-known event. It's not in your textbook, but this is the SS Manchuria, the ship that will take the Secretary of War, who at the time is Taft, and it will take President Roosevelt's oldest daughter, Alice, on this Asian journey. Now, Taft, it makes sense. He is a politician. He is engaged in the business of American government. It doesn't really make sense, though, why the president would send his daughter on this diplomatic cruise. Well, it actually does make sense. The purpose of this cruise is for Taft to be able to make a series of negotiations with leaders in Asian countries. Roosevelt doesn't want the public, and especially the papers. Roosevelt doesn't want the public, and particularly the press, to know about these negotiations. So Alice was brought as a distraction. Alice was the ticket in Washington, D.C. She was sort of the equivalent of a Kardashian, or, just a socialite that everyone wanted to know about. Everything she did was in the papers, and this drove her father nuts. Sometimes she would do things just to make him angry. Part of that was there was a little bit of resentment. Alice's mother died several years earlier, and Teddy remarried and had 5 or 6 additional children. So Alice always felt very left out and acted out in the way that she would go out with lots of men or be out at parties or clubs. And so this is a way to get her out of Washington, D.C., but also to distract the press. The people in these countries were enthralled with her and absolutely captivated by her, which provided a great opportunity for Taft to talk with the political and military leaders of these Asian countries. So on this imperial cruise, Taft and Alice go to Japan, they go to Korea, they go to China, they go to Hong Kong, and they go to the Philippines. And each of these locations has some sort of connection to later 20th century history. Because has America ever been engaged in war in Japan? Yes. Has America ever been engaged in war with Korea? Yes. The North Koreans were financed by the Chinese. Hong Kong is the British, and we are allies with the British. And war in the Philippines, that will happen also in World War II. So the author of this book, called The Imperial Cruise, he argues that what goes on in these negotiations in many ways sets the groundwork for the hostilities of later in the 20th century. The last thing is the Great White Fleet. In 1907, Teddy sends around this new modern navy, sends it on this sort of worldwide tour to circumnavigate the globe, and it's important that it is white. White ships demonstrate they are not in warfare. When ships are in battle, they are painted gray. So Roosevelt is just trying to demonstrate the power of our Navy, the size of our Navy. We're not going to war with anyone, but we are showing off our power. Now that will ultimately lead to some wars, as we will see. Roosevelt is just saying, hey, look at what we've got, look at who we are.